Okay, Jack, welcome to Superscoreboard. How are things?
Good. Obviously had a tremendously busy 6 months since I took on this job in late May, but it's an unbelievably good football club, huge club, and to date we've done okay. We've put ourselves in a position that means that we have a chance of success over the second half of the season. But in terms of experience to improve me as a manager, then it's been incredible in that respect.
You've been here just over 7 months. How have you settled in? Your family, of course, have moved down as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to to commit yourself to the job properly. I think it was an important thing for us to do as a family. I probably had a little bit of an advantage in the summer that I'd had previous possibilities to move from Scotland that I decided not to pursue. But at least through that, you have discussion around if you would move as a family. And so by the time this opportunity came around, my wife and I had decided that we'd move down as together along with our two daughters, and they've been down here since July as well. So and settled in remarkably well. Love the area we're staying in, and importantly for the kids, have settled at school, etc. So it's been, from a personal life aspect, it's went as well as it could be. Thankfully that's married with the professional aspect that going okay as well.
Moving from a club like St Mirren to a club like Sunderland, how big is the difference, and how hard is it to adapt?
There's a lot of things that remain consistent, in that football clubs they have a lot of similarities, and I think that if you are brave enough to continue to do things in the same manner to a degree and treat people in the way that I did, so through any of my management times, Alloa, and in particular to St Mirren because it was a full-time club, I brought a lot of that to here with me, and I think it's paid off in that respect. There are very obvious differences just in the size of the fan base, etc., and they are not, it's not demeaning St Mirren as a club in any way, because my time there was something that I'll always remember and I'll always be hugely grateful for, and I still keep an incredibly close eye on how the club's doing and want it to keep progressing well. But we had 46,000 fans in our stadium on Boxing Day, which in itself is a great honour to manage a club of that size, but brings its own unique pressures and responsibilities. So there's been adjustment, and the overall scrutiny of this job on a daily basis is far higher than I've ever had before. I'm obviously dealing with different players, with different financial aspects of the game, this side of the border, but I think we've adjusted fairly well. I've been fortunate, obviously I was able to bring staff with me as well, who I think have all adjusted to the new challenge as well.
You talked about the league position that you're in. You're sitting third in League One at the turn of the year. What would it mean to you to take Sunderland up in your first season in charge?
Well, it's the ambition that I set, not just myself at the start of the season, but I was happy to admit that publicly. I'd done that before. Obviously, my time at St Mirren, I've been quite open about goals and targets. The club was in a huge period of transition in the summer. Very difficult to explain properly and to go in depth without spending a huge amount of time in it. But in the summer, couldn't say with certainty how this first 6 months would pan out, and I don't think Stuart, my chairman, would as well, because he was going through that as well with taking ownership of the club. So we're probably further ahead of where we imagined we would be, and I know people might find that surprising because of the perception of this club, but there was an awful lot of change taking place. But I believe that we could be promoted in this first season, and naturally taking on this job was to try and manage in the Premiership, because I believe this club's already been there, the club can get there again, and you want to try and get there as quickly as you can. So being in the Championship next season would obviously be a step closer to that, but a quick step in the right direction, which is obviously important.
It's January, it is the transfer window, and that comes with many names being mentioned and linked with the club. You've obviously brought in Jimmy Dunn after his loan spell at Hearts, but two names that keep being mentioned north of the border, Lewis Morgan and Jack Henry.
Yeah, I mean, it's another part of the job that I've probably had to become more accustomed to, that speculation and association with different players is more regular and sometimes not very accurate, but I'm fairly relaxed about that. I just understand that it just goes with the territory. So with either of those players, no, there's been no communication with Brendan. Somebody that obviously I know well and was very supportive of me when I was managing in Scotland. No communication between the clubs, and naturally with Lewis, there's obviously that link is easier to make because I've worked with him, and he's a young man that I forged a really close relationship with, and he's somebody that I'm desperate to keep progressing his career. But I think I got asked in my own press conference last week about Lewis, and there may come a time in the future where I would love to work with a player of his ilk again and his quality, but certainly for the moment, those two players aren't ones that we have had any communication about.
How does a transfer window at Sunderland differ from a transfer window at St Mirren?
Well, probably we have a greater probably support structure around it, which is again just comes with the territory, the size of the club. So particularly that the first January window we had, James and I had St Mirren, we did a lot ourselves. Tony Fitzpatrick was a great help in his role as chief exec, but in terms of the actual identification and recruitment of players, a lot fell upon James and I. Whereas down here we have Tony Coton as head of recruitment, and we have a head of football operations, Richard Hill, as well. So the dynamic is different but good, and it takes quite a lot of work off my shoulders as well. So, and James's and John Potter now that's here. So that's probably the biggest difference. Other than that, I think again going back to the consistency, how you approach things, how we identify players in terms of their ability and their profile of character, as much as we did it in Scotland with St Mirren. It's just we have probably a greater support network around us.
Let's talk Netflix. Sunderland Till I Die. We've seen the camera crew going around filming the second series. Can you believe the reaction there has been to this?
It's been first of all when you come into the job, because obviously that was all filmed last season, and then it's been out now as the first series, if you like, released in December. So all through this season we have had the continued involvement of Fullwell 73 production company in preparation for a second series, and I think now on the back of how the first series has been received, that will be commissioned and go ahead. It's been very interesting and different for me as a manager. I think that the club knows this, and Fullwell know the production company, that ideally I don't want any distractions from what I'm doing on the football side, and I've always been consistent with that. However, there is a benefit to the club to be involved and being on, and having a series on Netflix which goes out to hundreds of millions of people globally, and I think the response that they've had to the first series, and equally, I watched the first series as a neutral to a degree because I wasn't in it at all, and I would have watched it if I hadn't been manager of Sunderland. I think if you're a football lover, I think you get the programme. I think it shows a side of football that people can relate to, and also it shows this club, or a lot of people around the club, that work here in a very good light. I have a kind of unique staff here around the training ground that the vast majority are Sunderland fans, born and bred, who are hugely passionate about the club, which is brilliant. They care an awful lot about what we do on a match day, and so they feel it an awful lot when the club has periods of decline, and so thankfully this 6 months to date they've smiled a lot, which has been nice as well. And it would be naturally for the production company, they want a happy ending to this season that fits with how they're trying to build this second series, but it's not as straightforward as that. But it's been another hugely different experience for me as a manager, but one that hopefully will stand me in good stead moving forward as well.
Did you learn anything about the club watching the first series?
Oh, I probably knew a lot about those things because once I was in the club, I came down here after being appointed. I came in pretty much right away, so I spent a good few weeks in here with very few staff around. In hindsight, maybe I did that too early and I didn't give myself enough of a break, but I wanted to get a feel for the club and everything that had gone on and why it had found itself suffering 2 consecutive relegations. So there was a lot of things that are shown in the series that I was aware of. Obviously I didn't know some of the people personally because I never came across them, but I had a little bit of a feel for what had gone on last year, and obviously there's some people in the series that are still working at the club, Joyce in the kitchen, etc., are all people that are still around the club and have been hugely supportive of me. So it was, if anything, it just strengthened that understanding I already had, but strengthened that these people care a huge amount about this football club.
And off